Hello guys, welcome to the next session of developing e-commerce application from scratch using Angular and Spring Boot. In the last session we discussed on how we can design these view product details page. On the left hand side we are able to see all the product images, on the right hand side we are able to see all the product details, and then we have one button that is called as a buy now button. So again we are developing the e-commerce application, and in the e-commerce application the buy now functionality is really very important functionality because user will come to our application to buy the product. So buy now or buying the product is very important functionality in an e-commerce application. So from today onwards we are going to focus on how we can implement this buy product functionality. Again, there are a lot of things involved. There are few backend things and there are few UI things as well. So to make this entire series more constructive, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to divide the backend part and I'm just going to divide the UI part as well. So in this session let's focus on the backend part, and probably in the next session we will see how we can connect the backend changes with the UI as well. So without wasting much more time, let me just take you to the IntelliJ. And over here previously whatever services we have created, like we have created different controllers and services for the product, then users, and some of are related to the JWT as well. Now again what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tell you every single thing step by step, but before starting let me just give you some instruction. Just focus on every single word or every single class name that I'm typing, because in this functionality lot of classes I'm going to create and lot of lines I'm going to write. So make sure you are just following every single thing, because any single spelling mistake or any single class name change might impact the functionality, and you might end up with getting a lot of errors. So focus on every single word that I'm writing over here. So firstly let's try to create some controller. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one controller which will be for a managing the order. So I'm just going to create one controller and I'm just going to give the name as orders controller, like this. Or maybe what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to make it as a order detail controller. So orders detail controllers, like this. Similarly let me just add one service as well. So let me just create one new class and let me just give the name as order detail service. And similarly we have to use a DAO as well. So let me just create one new interface and let me just give the name as order detail DAO, like this. Now we have created all the basic controller, service and DAO. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create the entity. So let me just create one entity, and this entity basically I'm going to design to store the order detail. So we will be having the order ID, then the name which is associated with the order, then address. So every single thing which is related to the order, I'm just going to create entity to store that information. So let me just create one new class and let me just give the name as order detail, like this. And now the very first thing that we have to do is we have to give the annotation that is called as a @entity. Then we have to give all the properties which are involved in this order detail. So let me just use private, then integer, and let me just use order ID. If you want you can just use long as well, but I think as of now integer is sufficient, so I'm just using integer. Then string, private string, and order full name. So that order full name means a user's full name who is going to buy, or who is going to buy the product. Similarly private string order full address, because we want to deliver this product, so we require the address to deliver the product. Then the next thing is contact number. So let me just use private string order contact number, like this. And if you want, you can just take one more contact number, like alternate contact number. So if one number is not reachable, then we can just connect with the user with the second number. So let me just use order alternate contact number. And lastly, we have to use a status as well, like order status, whether it is placed, whether it is shipped or delivered, whatever status we have which is associated with the order, then we have to store that status as well. So let me just use private string order status. And there is one more very important thing is order amount. Like whatever order user is placing, we have to give the final amount, final bill to the user. So we want one field which will store the order amount. So let me just use private double order amount, like this. And then this integer, I'm going to make it as @id, and then we have to give generated value, and then strategy should be the auto. Now the next thing that we have to do is we have to generate the getters and setters. So let me just generate getters and setters. Let me select all the fields and let me generate the getters and setters. And again, one more thing that we have to do is we have to generate the constructor as well. So why I'm generating the constructor? Because we are going to create object of this order detail. So with the help of constructor, it becomes a bit easy to create or initialize the order details object. So let me just create it, but this time just make sure that you are not selecting the order ID, because order ID is basically something which is Spring Boot is going to order ID is automatically going to be generated by the Spring Boot, right? So we don't need to use the order ID in a constructor. Except order ID, we have to use all these things in a constructor. So just make sure you are not selecting this order ID and click on the OK. Now let me just save all the changes. So our order detail entity is ready. Now let me just close this entity. Now let me just come to the order detail controller, and over here let me just use first of all a notation that is called as a REST controller. Let me just come to the order detail service and let me just use a notation that is called as a @service. And now let me just come to the order detail DAO, and let me just first of all do one thing. Let me just use extends and let me just use CRUD repository. In a CRUD repository, there are two parameters that we have to give. Not a parameters, because CRUD repository is a generic, so we have to give the type of classes that we are going to use with the CRUD repository. So my class name is order detail. So let me just give order detail, comma, we have to give the integer. So integer is nothing but in order detail, whatever ID we have. So order ID is nothing but a ID of this entity. So we have to give the type of the order ID, so integer. So over here, if you have the long, make sure you are giving long over here. Now we are done with this DAO. The next thing that we have to do is we have to create the REST API, or we can say that endpoint, so that we can place the order. So let me just use private, not a private, let me just make it as a public only, public. As of now, let me just keep it as a void, and then let me just create one function or method that is called as a place order. And now what we have to do is we have to specify the parameter to place the order, because user will be browsing the different products, and whichever product user likes, user is going to place order for that product, right? So we want those details, like which product is user is trying to buy. We want those details over here inside this place order parameter. We want those details while placing the order. So we want to take that parameter over here. So again, to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create one more class that is called as a, let's suppose, order input. That class will define all the fields that we want from the user, and then I will just quickly tell you while creating it itself. So let me just go to the entity again, and let me just create one more class, and let me just use it as a order input, and this order input will act as a parameter. I mean, this order input we are going to take details from the user. So what details we want from the user? So initially we want, first of all, we want the full name, like full name of the user. Then we want the full address. Then we want the contact number, and along with that we want the alternate contact number. So like you may find that just now we have created one entity that is called as order detail, which is having the same or similar fields that we are writing over here. So you might get this question at this moment, but just give me some time, I will explain every single thing in a few moments. So right now just create those fields, alternate contact number, and lastly we want one list of the product. So user is going to buy the product. Let's suppose if user is interested in this painting and the product ID is 7. So if you just see it inside the URL, you will see that product ID is 7. Now user is clicking on this buy now button. So user is interested in buying this product 7. So buying this product which is having the ID as a 7. So we want this ID at the back end so that we can place the order. So we want this product ID. Along with that we want the quantity as well, like how much quantity user want to buy. Maybe it might be 1, 2, 3. So whatever quantity user want to buy, we want that quantity as well from the user as an input. So again, so we want product ID and we want its associated quantity. So we want combination of both of that, like combination of product ID and quantity as well. So for this, again I am going to create one more class. Let me just create one more Java class, and let me just give the name as order product quantity, like this. So this order product quantity only will be having only two fields. So first field will be a nothing but a product ID. So let me just give integer product ID, and then the next field it will have is private integer. It will have the quantity. So it will have the quantity like this. And let me just create the getters and setters like this. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just come back to the order input. Over here I'm just going to use private, and over here I'm going to use a list of order product quantity, like this. And now you might be having the question like why I am using list over here, right? So the reason is, as of now we are just thinking on like buying the single product, but let's suppose in the future we are going to implement the functionality that is called as a cart. So user will add the products into a cart, and then that cart user will try to check out. So in the cart we can add multiple products. So user can add 1, 2, 3, or in some cases 10, 20 products as well. So there might be a list of products, and in a one shot user will try to buy it. So to do these, like place the order for multiple products in a single shot, that is the reason I'm going to use list over here. So as of now I'm just going to use a list. Currently we are just focusing on only single product, but let's use a list over here so that in the future it will be easy for us to implement the add to cart or cart checkout functionality. So now let me just generate the getters and setters, and let me just hit on the OK. And now we are just done with the order input as well. Now the next thing that we have to do is, let me just close these classes that we don't want. Okay, so now let me just come to the place order. Like let me just come to the order detail controller. Inside this we are just creating the method that is called as a place order. First of all, let me just give it as a post mapping. and let me just give the name as place order, like this. Then we have to give @request body, and then we have to give the class name. So we have to give order product quantity, not order product quantity, order input, like this. And now the next thing that we have to do is we have to inject our service. So let me just use private product service, and we have to use it as a auto wired. And inside the product service we have to create one more method that is called as a place order. So let me just go to the product service. Inside the product service, okay, so over here I just did one mistake. Like, we don't want product service, we want order detail service to be injected, like this. And let me just go to the order detail service. Inside this, let me just create public. As of now, let me keep it as void, and let me just create one more function that is called as a place order. This is again going to take one parameter, that is order input, like this. And we are going to call this service method from our controller. So let me just come back to the controller, and let me just use order detail service dot place order, and we have to pass the order input, like this. Now let me just come back to the order detail service. Over here, what we have to do is we have to process this order input, and then we have to place the orders. So again, processing the order input is really very important. Just make sure that you are just writing the every single line that I'm showing on the screen. The very first thing that we have to do is we have to inject the order detail DAO, order detail DAO, like this. And let me just use @auto wired, like this. And then what we have to do is we have to just process this order input. So to do this, let me just do one thing. Let me just use order input dot get order product quantity list. So this is going to give us one list. So let me just store it inside the list. Products list, product quantity list, like this. Now inside this product quantity list, what we have the product ID and its associated quantities, right? So what we have to do is we have to just use a for loop so that we can iterate over the list. So let me just use order product quantity, let me just give it as O, and we have to give the list name, like this. Then the next thing that we have to do is we have to so what we have to do is we have to just create the object of order detail. So I'll just explain you what I'm trying to say over here, but again there are multiple things involved. So let me just come back to the order detail service. Over here, what we have to do is we have to just create object of order detail. Order detail is equals to new order detail, like this. Then this order detail, now we are getting errors over here because this order detail is having the parameterized constructor, and we have to send all the parameters to this constructor. So let's pass one by one, like whatever parameters required by the order detail. Very first parameter is required by the order detail is full name. So let's try to send that full name. So where we are going to get the full name, we are going to get that full name inside our order input. So let's use order input or O dot get order input dot get full name. Then we are going to use order input dot get full address, because second parameter is nothing but a full address. Then the next parameter is contact number and alternate contact number. Order input dot get contact number, comma order input dot get alternate contact number. And then the next field we have is order status, and lastly we have the order amount. So for the order status, let me just create one variable which is a private static string. Then let me just make it as a order placed, order underscore placed is equals to placed, and let me just make it as a final as well, like this. And this variable, because as of now we are just going to place the order, that is the reason I'm just trying to give the order status as a placed. And then lastly let me just give one more parameter that is called as order amount. Now order amount we want to calculate, because we can't hard code the order amount, or we are not going to get order amount from somewhere, because we have to calculate it at the back end and then we have to place it. Okay, now there are one more thing that is involved in this, because we are going to place the order, and over here if you see there is no any link between the order and the product. As of now this is completely independent entity, so we want to create one link between this order and between the product as well. So for this what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one more field that is called as private product, like this. And again the next thing that we have left back is adding the user detail as well, because user is going to place the order, right? But we want some record, like this particular order, let's suppose order ID 5. So order ID 5, we want some record, we want that data in our database, like who have placed this order, who is owning this order. So we want those details as well, right? So for this what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a private user. So user is an entity that already we have created, so let me just give the user like this. Now again writing only this will not be sufficient, because we want that entity connection between this, we want the foreign key relationship between this order and product. So we want to just use @1to1 1to1, and similarly we want this @1to1 with this user as well. Now let me just save these changes, and now let me just do one thing, let me just remove this constructor and let me just create a new one, because just now we have added some fields. So we want to create a getter setters as well, and we want to create one new constructor as well. So let me just use a constructor, and again just don't select the order ID, just skip this order ID, and remaining fields just try to select those, and let me just click on the OK. Now let me just save it, and inside the order detail service, after this status what we want is, after this status we want the order amount, and lastly we want the product details and user detail as well. As of now let me just try to hardcore the order amount like this, and now we want the product details. So how we are going to get the product details? Obviously we are going to retrieve the product details from the database, right? So let me just do one thing, let me just first of all try to inject product DAO. So let me just use private product DAO, let me just use @autowired, and then product DAO. Inside a for loop, make sure inside a for loop you are just using product DAO dot find by ID. Now from where we are going to get the ID? that ID is present into this product quantity, order product quantity. So if you just remember, we created this order product quantity which contains the product ID and its associated quantities. So let me just use o dot get product ID, and lastly we want to call a get because it is going to return us the optional. Now this particular line is going to return us one product, so let me just save it inside one product like this. And now whatever product we will receive, we are just going to pass that product over here. And lastly we are going to get the user details. Now getting the user details, it's bit tricky because we are not going to get user ID from any kind of UI or any kind of from any kind of input field. We have to know that at the backend itself, like which user is currently accessing the application. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take you to the configuration package. Inside the configuration package, we created these, let me just open, we created this package that is called as a JWT request filter. Inside the JWT request filter, if you see on line number 38, we are going to get the JWT token, and on line number 40 we are going to get the username with the help of this JWT token. So we already have all the logic. What we want is whichever user is accessing this application right now, we are going to get the token from that user, JWT token from that user, and from that JWT token we are going to get the username, and in that way we will get that which user is currently accessing the application. The only thing is this particular username is nothing but a local variable. We want to make it as a like globally accessible. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use public static, and then we can just give it as a string only, and then let me just use current underscore user. You can actually create one utility class and then you can just give all the details over here, but as of now I'm just trying to keep it as simple as possible. So that's why I'm just creating one simple static variable like this. And then current user is as of now we don't have any value to the current user, but as soon as we will get the value to the username, what we are going to do is we are just going to assign that value like current user is equals to username like this. And now let me just save this code. And now JWT request filter, inside this JWT request filter we have the field that is called as a current user. So what we have to do is, first of all, inside this for loop, as soon as we get the product detail, the next thing that we have to do is we have to get the user detail as well. So let me just do one thing. Let me just use JWT request filter dot current user, and it is going to return us the current user name like this. Now we want to fetch the current username or current user detail from the database. So again we want to inject user DAO. So let me just inject user DAO @autowired, and then we have to just use user DAO dot find by ID. We have to pass the current user ID and we have to make it as a dot get, because again it is going to return us the optional. It is going to return us the user detail. So let me just save it into a users object like this. Now we have the product detail and user as well. Product detail we have already assigned. Now lastly we have to just pass the user detail to the constructor. The only thing that we have left back is calculating this order amount. So again, calculating the order amount is really very simple. What we have to do is we have to just, like, we have the product detail, so we have to just do is product dot get actual price into, we have to just use o dot get quantity, like this, and this is going to return us the product amount. Now our order detail object is completely done and we have passed all the required values. The only thing that we have left back is we have to just put this order detail into a database. So again, to do this we have to use, like we have previously created order detail DAO. So what we have to do is we have to just use order detail DAO dot save, and then we have to just pass our order detail object like this, and it is going to save this order detail in a database. Now we are done with every single thing, and let me just go to the controller. Yes, so we have completed this creating API. Then we have the place order function method, and then inside the service order detail service we have done with this place order, and we have order detail DAO as well. The only thing that we have left back is we have to just apply the security. So let me just go to the product controller and let me just copy this annotation that is called as a @pre-authorize and has role is equals to admin. But now let me just come to the controller and let me just make it as a user, because we want this API to be accessible only by the user, because user is going to place the order, right? So now let me just save these changes. Now let me just try to rerun the application. Let's see what happens, because let me just first of all take you to the MySQL workbench, and over here we have the DB that is called as a e_commerce_YouTube. Let me refresh the as of now, and as of now, like we have these kind of tables. So we don't have any table which is related to the order. So what I'm expecting is, as soon as I rerun the application, I'm expecting that order detail table should also get created over here. Now let me just try to run the application and let's see what happens. So over here our application is started. Let me just come to the MySQL. Let me just try to refresh it, and yes, now if you just see, we have one table that is called as a order detail, and if I just try to use select star from order detail, at the end you will find the product ID and username as well. So the foreign key relationship is also going to be maintained over here. Now let me just try to use a product table. Let's see what happens. So we have the 4 products and we don't have any additional column over here. And then let me just go to the user, and user table is also looking perfectly fine. So now it's time to test our API. Let's see what happens. So now let me just come to the Postman, and over here we have to use http localhost :9090. Make sure you are changing the port number, like whatever you have. If you have 8080, let's put 8080 over here. Then we have to give the API name, which is a place order. The important thing that comes next is we have to pass the authorization, or we have to pass the authorization header. So for this, inside the authorization header we have to pass the JWT token. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to generate that JWT token. So there is one more API that we have previously created that is called as a localhost :9090/authenticate. So inside this authenticate, what we have to do is, in a body, and make sure you are just selecting JSON over here, we have to pass the username and we have to pass the parameter. So if you are watching my series from very initial stage, you must be know this, like, because we have already done this lot of time. Now let me just try to send this, and make sure the API method is a post method, and now we got our JWT token. So let me just copy the JWT token, and let me just come back to my place order API. Inside the place order, let me just try to add, first of all, bearer. So make sure you are giving the correct spelling. bearer, and then you are giving the space as well. And now let me just paste my JWT token. Now let me just come back to the body, and over here we have to give the details. So first of all we have to give the full name. So let me just show you in IntelliJ. If you just see, place order is going to take order input as a parameter. In order input we have full name, full address, contact number, alternate contact number, and then we have one list as well, which is product and quantity list. So we have the product ID and quantity. And make sure whatever spellings we are using over here, like for full name, make sure in the postman while sending the request you are giving the exact same spellings. So full name I have already used, full address I have used, contact number I have used, alternate contact number I have used. Then we have the products. So over here I think the name is different, so let me just go to the IntelliJ, and right now I have to give the name that is called as a order product quantity list. Let me just copy the name and let me just paste it over here like this, and then let me just check the spelling for product ID and quantity. So we have the product ID and then quantity. So over here also I'm using product ID, and I have to use a quantity over here. So let me just copy and let me just paste it over here like this. So I'm going to use the quantity as a 2. Okay, now let me just try to send this, and make sure it is a post method, and make sure you are just passing the authorization header as well, because we are going to use these JWT token to understand like to get the username. So that is the reason this particular JWT token is really very important. Now let me just come back to the body and let me just try to send this. Now we got the 200 response. So as of now we are not going to return anything, but we got the 200 response. So let me just take you to the MySQL. Let's see what happened. So let me just try to refresh the order detail. So if you just see, order is placed and we are able to see the order ID as a 16 and order amount as a 2000. So if you just see, like order amount is a 2000, and we are able to see the product ID which is a 1, and we are able to see the username which is Raj123. So Raj123, from where it came from the JWT token. And if you just see in a postman, while logging in I used the username that is called as a Raj123 only. And now let me just take you to the order amount. So if you just want to check the order amount is calculated correctly or not, what you can do is you can just note down these product ID. So product ID is 1. Now go to the product table, and now for this product ID 1, if you just see, actual price is 1000, and if you just go to the place order API, if you just see, like quantity is equals to 2. So actual price is 1000 and quantity is 2, which makes order amount as a 2000. So that is the reason in our order detail table 2000 is inserted. So it is like this value is also getting calculated pretty correctly, and order status is also placed. So I hope like you got an idea how we can place the orders. There are multiple things which are involved in this, and again I'm just not going to stretch this session till now. Just try to complete this particular functionality. In the next session we will focus on the UI part, like whatever order input we are taking from the postman, we will try to take this from the UI, Angular UI, and along with that we have a lot of functionalities to develop. So we have to show the final bill to the user, then we have to show like we have to show the drop down to select the quantity, and if we have like select the quantity, and if user is changing the quantity, then we have to change its bill as well dynamically. So we have a lot of functionalities to develop, and again one more functionality that we will at the end focus on, we will generate the bill as well. So whenever user will place the order, instead of returning the void over here, we will return the entire order details, and we will show those order details on a UI to the user, so that user can user can get the idea which order is placed and what is the order ID and what is the status of that order. So we have a lot of things involved over here. but we can't complete all those things in a one session. We want multiple sessions to be created. So I hope you got an idea, like from the backend perspective, how you can create the place order API. I tried my best to tell you in a very simple language and in a step by step manner. But if you still have any questions, let me know into a comment section, and I will be always be there to help you out in that case. And I hope you enjoyed this session, and I'll see you in the next session.